Coming up, I'll talk about my recent trip to Baltimore for a leadership seminar. There was some stormy weather going, a lot of information, made some great new friends. I'll tell you all about it. Stick with me.
From Studio B in Swarthmore, this is the iCantCU podcast with David. It's like blind people for dummies.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of iCantCU, your window into a world where blindness doesn't dictate ability. My name is David, at David Benj on all the socials. I am grateful that you're here for this episode, and welcome inside Studio B. As you'll see on my B-roll, if you're watching on YouTube, what's going on over to my right, we've got some equipment set up and things like that going on over there. So that is coming up. I'll talk about that in a little bit. The main thing I wanted to talk about today is my recent trip to Baltimore. I went down to Baltimore. I was invited down by the president of the NFB, and it was for a seminar that was 3 days. We were there 5 days total because I came in on Wednesday, went home on Sunday like everybody else. The day that the travel in was brutal. There was a terrible windstorm that turned into a terrible rain and windstorm that made me nervous that I was going to miss my train. I left a little early from my house because as I was listening to the traffic reports, even before the rain had started, the winds were so bad, trees were blocking roads. When I got to the station, I was supposed to leave at a particular time. I didn't leave for an hour after that because just when the train was 10 or 15 minutes away, there was a signal issue because the wind had knocked something onto the signal. And we were actually standing on the platform. Usually, you know how it is when you go on the train, you go down to the platform around 10 or 15 minutes before you leave. We were down there for 45 minutes to an hour before the train even showed up. I was told by a red cap that the train was just 10 or 15 minutes down the line, but couldn't proceed because of this signaling issue from the wind. By the time I got to 30th Street Station, and fortunately, going to the station in the car, there were no issues. We jumped right on the highway, I-476 and I-95, and then I-76. All was good on the roads. The rain didn't start until we got close to 30th Street Station. And by the time I got out, it was raining pretty good. But that wasn't an issue until I got to Baltimore. And not that it was a big issue once I was in Baltimore. The train ride itself, no problems. I was fortunate enough to be on an Acela. I usually don't pay for Acela. Occasionally, if it's close to the regular train, I will do it because the seats are a little more comfortable. The ride's a little nicer. In this instance, the National Federation of the Blind had booked my travel and paid for my travel, so I didn't have to worry about that. And again, if pricing is comparable, I will take Acela. But generally, I do not because it doesn't get me there that much faster to warrant that extra expense. And usually it could be a pretty significant difference in price where I may pay $20 or $30 for a regular coach seat. This might be $70 to $100. And I just don't feel that it's worth that to do it. If I got there a lot earlier, it'd be a different story. Travel down wasn't an issue as far as the train goes. Once I got to Baltimore, I walked out of the station thinking there was an overhang right outside the door. And there was something, it was more like a pergola. So you know how the pergola has basically a beam and then a space and then a beam, and that doesn't help you in the rain. It might help when you're growing grapevines to cover it, but they weren't doing that at Penn Station in Baltimore. So I was right up against the building, so I wasn't getting too wet. My suitcase got pretty wet. And when the rideshare came, it was an easy walk out. It's a nice setup that they have there for pickup, other than the fact that there's not any kind of covering to wait when the sky is full. It's a very quick ride from the station over to the National Center over on East Wells Street in Baltimore. And I got out, no problem. I did get somewhat wet walking into the door because there was no overhang from the street until you got closer to the door. So again, it was raining pretty good. Puddles everywhere, water rushing down the street. I don't know what kind of storm it was, but it was enough, and we needed the rain, so that part was good. Once I got there, though, was just a little bit of time to relax before we all got together. All our meals were covered, and they have a great setup there at the National Center. They have dormitories there that the last time I had been down there, when I had done training for NFB Newsline, and if you would like NFB Newsline and you're in Pennsylvania, please reach out to me and I can get you set up on that. Other states, I'm sorry, I can't. When we did training for Newsline, the place that we stayed now was all under construction. And they kind of explained to us at the time what it was going to be. I never imagined it would be as nice as it was. It was so nice. There was a living area, almost like a dormitory in a college, but each room had a little sitting area with a couch and a side table and a light, and then a nice sized bathroom. Then there was the sleeping area to the back, similar to a hotel room, although the beds were single beds because when they're busy and they have some big seminar going on, people room together, and obviously they set it up like that. And that's why I kind of think of a college dorm as opposed to a hotel room. So that's down one side of the hallway, the left side of the hallway as you're walking down. Room 1 is all the way at the front, and then you walk down, and I think there were 20 rooms. And on the right side, there's a wide open area, kind of like a living room, kitchen type area that has a game table. And I forget what it's called. I want to say it's called Powerball, but of course that's the lottery. So I'm not 100%. And it was a lot of fun. I played a few games of that, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. They also have, besides a couple of seating areas, they also have what they call Braille walls. And it's basically, if you're familiar with Braille at all, Braille has a 6-cell, I don't know what you would call the dots. There's a combination of, think of a muffin pan. You have a muffin pan, you can make 6 muffins in it. Depending on where you put the muffins, if you don't fill the whole pan, that determines what the letter is. So for example, a D is the first cell, the 4th cell, and the 5th cell. So as you're feeling it, it kind of is like an arrow up and to the right, which I think is very cool. So they have these Braille walls and racquetballs to put in. And I thought, wow, if there's any time I'm going to learn Braille, it's here using something big like this, because with the way my hands are, there's no way I can feel the little dots. It's probably 30 seconds to figure out what each letter is if I try to read it. And it's just not something that I could do long term, again, because of the way my hands are. So all of that is there. There's a kitchen with a fridge and an ice maker and obviously water and a stove. And they also have on the hallway, they have a laundry facility. They have a room that has a couple of computers, like a little sitting area. And somewhere I was told there was a fitness room. I didn't see the fitness room. I didn't go in there. And there really wasn't any time to go in there, to be honest. And I'll get into that in a minute. But you can see here with the B-roll that I'm running, if you're watching on YouTube, you could see what it's like and what I'm speaking of. And in another section of this room, not where the sleeping rooms are, and the sleeping rooms are key coded. So you need your card to open the doors to get to the sleeping area that has this living room and several seating areas in the kitchen and things like that. And outside of that, there's another sitting area with a nice fireplace. And then that leads into an area where there is, I don't want to call it a cafeteria, a dining room, let's call it. And along one side is where they set the food up, and they have folks there serving you and telling you what's there. And there's always a couple of options to eat. It was so nice. And the folks who were there, the 3 people that were working that, again, so helpful, couldn't do enough to help us out. But the best part is, straight in front, after you get your food and you go sit in on a table, you can take your cup. I brought one of my travel mugs with me. They have drinks along the wall that's perpendicular to the food wall. If you just keep walking straight, there's all sorts of drinks, sodas, juices, coffee, hot tea, and iced tea. Now, the device, and again, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see there's 2 things of iced tea. To the left was unsweetened, and to the right was sweet tea. Now, I never had the sweet tea, so I don't know if it was full-on sweet tea or just sweetened iced tea. And there is a difference. I think. But as I told the president, I said, this alone might have me staying here forever because I could get that iced tea at any hour of any day. It was like going up to a spigot, and instead of water coming out, I could get iced tea. There was an ice machine there. It was awesome. The only issue that I had was I might have had too many during our breaks. So then when we went back into a session, I then sometimes really had to go before we broke for a break, whether it was lunch or dinner or just a break. And the problem there is when one person needed a break, everybody got a break. So I didn't want to be that guy. And I wasn't. Thank God I wasn't. But there were some times where people kept asking questions and I'm like, please, no more questions. Please, I just have to go. And that's just the dorm, and I don't want to call it residence area. And that's just one section of this large building that basically covers a city block in Baltimore. The working area of the building has offices for all the folks who work at the National Federation of the Blind. Some are blind sighted. Obviously, the folks that drive for the NFB have sight. But the people on the national board who don't necessarily work or live in Baltimore, they're all blind on the national board. Anybody that works at the NFB, again, like I said, some are blind, some are not. But all sorts of offices. There's additional dorm room sections where when I was there 5 years ago, that's where or 6 years ago, I guess now, that's where I stayed when I trained for NFB Newsline. They have several eating places. One of the things that I loved was an always-on hot water where you could make tea or instant coffee. And I loved it because you could just walk over to it. You didn't have to put a pot on the stove. You just walked over, had tea bags in your mug and got the water and boom, your tea was brewing. This area was where most of the staff will eat lunch and things like that. There's also some empty space in there where they are hoping to do a museum and they are fundraising for that now. It's just a great facility. And again, it's very, very big. So the folks who were in this seminar came from all over the place. Obviously, I was from Pennsylvania. No one else was from Pennsylvania. There was somebody from New York, Virginia, South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, Michigan. If you're listening or watching, and I don't mention your state, I apologize. Oklahoma, Iowa, Nebraska, New Mexico, Utah, Washington, Alaska. And the person who came from Alaska, Kelsey, had to take 2 different flights going home. It's roughly a 12 or 14-hour journey going home. I just couldn't imagine changing here and changing there. Just a long day to get from Alaska to Baltimore. So again, everybody from all over the place, many age ranges. I was, of course, on the upper end of the age range, but I wasn't the oldest. I was surprised. There were 2 people that were older than me. And one of them, his name was Frank. He was from New Mexico. Everybody confused us. Now, he and I, along with one of the other guys, were bald. They didn't confuse us for our bald heads. They confused us because they told us we sounded similar. And I think that was funny. And everybody would say Frank. And then it got to the point where they were just calling me Frank to be funny. And I'll get more into that in a little bit. But everybody has some sort of, whether they're the president of their NFB affiliate in their particular state or in some sort of leadership within their state affiliate or a chapter within a state affiliate. And again, the NFB is broken down. There's the national level. Then there's the state level. They're called affiliates. There's 52, just like there are 52 states. Oh, wait, there's not 52 states, are there? But there are 52 affiliates because the District of Columbia has one and Puerto Rico has one. So 52 affiliates. And then in each affiliate, which I don't think DC has any chapters, but most affiliates have chapters and divisions. Chapters are a local sort of thing. The Keystone chapter, for example, is one of the ones in Pennsylvania in the Philadelphia area. Greater Philly is another one in the Philadelphia area, primarily with folks from Philadelphia. Keystone has a few people from Philadelphia, but also has folks like me from Delaware County or Montgomery County or Bucks County. Then there's other chapters around the state. Divisions are a statewide thing, but not at the same level as the state affiliate. Like the blind merchants, there's not a blind merchants that's local to a particular area. It covers the whole state. So the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Merchants, there's people in it from my area in around Philadelphia and the Harrisburg area, up in Scranton, out in Pittsburgh, and so forth. There's a whole bunch of folks from everywhere in the divisions. And that's how the Blind Parents Division is, or Parents of Blind Children, or Deaf-Blind Division, things like that. They come from all across the state. So that's how the NFB are broken down. And so the folks who were down in Baltimore are already in some sort of leadership capacity within either their affiliate or in their chapters. So to see all these folks down there, and as we went through each session and talking and hearing what people say, some were so smart. And I thought, wow, there are people there much younger than me, in their 20s, that I'm thinking, okay, these folks are going to be in leadership one day within the organization, meaning at the national level. And when I got home, after remembering what, for example, Frank always had, it just seemed like a wisdom that I don't have. I just don't have it. And some of the other folks had smarts that I don't have. And so when I got home, I thought, what am I going to do? Why was I there? What could I do to make the organization better in Pennsylvania? And I thought about it for a while. I knew I wasn't as smart as a lot of the folks there, and I knew I wasn't as wise as some of the other folks there. But what I have and what I could do is my communication skills. And so the first week that I was home, I thought, what can I do to make the NFB of Pennsylvania better? And I thought, one thing that would be good would be to get the word out each week on what's going on within the affiliate, whether it's meetings at the chapter level or division level. So I came up with this. And when I say I went to ChatGPT, I said, here's what I want to do. Give me some name ideas. And it gave me 10 because I asked for 10. And one of them that it came up with was Federation Focus. And I loved it. And so that's what I go with. And so I've already done a couple of episodes of Federation Focus. It's over on the National Federation of the Blind YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/NFB of PA altogether. So at NFB of PA. If you just do a search in the app for National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania or NFB of PA, you will also get White Canes Connect, because that's one of the tags that I put when we drop an episode there. And it does also have its own YouTube channel at PA Blind Podcast. That's not a video, however, it's just a static image and the audio. So not only do I do the upcoming events, whether it is the meetings, again, either chapter level, division level, or, for example, coming up the first week of April, every first week of every month, on Wednesday night at 7:30, we do this thing that is an event with the president of the affiliate. Her name is Lynn Heitz. It's called Coffee with the President and NFB of PA Board. I know it's a long title. And if you have a great idea for a name, I'd love to hear it. Share it with me, please. iCantCU podcast at gmail.com, because it's just too long. It should be shorter and maybe a little more catchy. But for now, that's what it's called. So I'll talk about that, and I'll talk about who's going to be at that meeting. Some months we do meetings where it's just Lynn talking about things that have happened. In February, it was right after Washington seminar, so she talked to a few of us who had been at Washington seminar. People ask questions about things that are going on within the affiliate. We talked about national convention and state convention, all things that are coming up throughout the year. National convention is in July. State convention is in November. So I talk about that, but I also talk about fundraising that is going on at the various chapters and divisions. And just one more way to promote and get the word out, maybe doing this YouTube channel. And it's horrifying how quickly it blew by my iCantCU channel. More than double the subscribers already. The downloads for the first episode topped 50. I haven't sniffed 50 on any of my episodes after 16 or 17 months of doing the podcast on video. So I knew that it would be a way when people search for blind organizations or Pennsylvania blind organizations, it's a way to get our name out in front of other folks who may not know of us or have any idea we exist. So by doing these Federation Focus every Monday, it just will continue to get the word out. So when people are doing those searches, so that was what I thought I could do to help. And a couple of people have told me, Jane being one of them, my executive producer for all things that I do. And she's been working a lot lately with me because I've been putting out a lot. And I'll get into that in a minute. Somebody else said to me, didn't you complain you were doing so much you didn't have time to do anything else? And yes, I did. And yes, I do. And when I was in Baltimore, we were told that there is a sheet that you have to put in how many volunteer hours you do a month. And I sat there and I started thinking, every episode of White Canes Connect that we do, including the recording of the episode, I spend probably minimum of 5 hours. It's usually an hour to an hour and a half to record the episode. And then depending on the episode, it could be only 2 hours to edit. It's usually not that easy. It's usually more than 2 hours. So let's figure maybe 3 hours to edit, sometimes more if there's, I was sick for the month of February, and I'll talk about that when I tell you about the latest episode of White Canes Connect. There are all sorts of edits that I have to make. So the more coughing, sneezing, questions, whatever might go on during an episode, I've got to stop, I've got to chop, and then I've got to listen to make sure it sounds right. And so that could take time. Then I've got to do the show notes. Now, the nice thing is the show notes are done by AI. I take the transcript of the podcast, I take it into ChatGPT, and I ask it for 200 words based on this summary and so forth. So that cuts the time down a lot. Obviously, I still have to edit the show notes, and there are more than what that puts out that I have in the show notes because I talk about upcoming events, meaning book your room for this or make sure you register for that and so forth that are in there that changes from episode to episode, just like the summary does, but it might not be something that we talk about in the episode. So that has helped with doing show notes for both this podcast as well as White Canes Connect. So when all is said and done, it's about 5 hours, probably over. But 5 hours, and then I take it and put it out on all the socials, whether it's my socials or the NFB of Pennsylvania socials or NFB and White Canes Connect socials. So there's a lot of social that goes on with that to promote the episodes. For example, the episode that I'm working on now, episode 129, which will come out hopefully by Monday, I'm going to grab some audio because they have some audio tours of their garden. So stay tuned for that if you're interested. And I'll talk more about White Canes Connect in a minute, the latest episode that is actually out right now. So when I have to do that or I have to go search for something, that obviously takes time. So I figure about 5 hours. Again, on occasion, it may be less, but more times than not, it's probably well over 5 hours when all is said and done. And then all the things that go on from day to day within the NFB of Pennsylvania. Remember, I'm the treasurer of the Keystone chapter. I'm the treasurer of the Blind Merchants Division, and I'm the first vice president of the affiliate, the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. So each one of those positions has more tasks. And sometimes there's not a lot of additional things. Keystone, for example, coming up, I have a board call to talk about things that we're going to talk about at our chapter meeting, and then we all have tasks to do. I had to contact a restaurant in Philadelphia called City Tap House, which unfortunately I had to call a couple of times before I actually spoke to someone, even though I had left a message. Once I did speak to somebody, they said, you have to contact so-and-so via email. Here's our email address. So I've done that. Let's see if I hear back in time for the meeting. I don't know that I will. And then moving forward, we have the blind merchants. Well, coming up in May, the blind merchants are doing what we're calling Spring Fling. And what the Spring Fling is, it's a blind vendor showcase. So if you've got a business, for example, I have digital graphics design, I could take a table at our event and talk about doing websites for your organization. I'm not going to do that because I'll be doing a lot of other things And I don't think, because it's basically me doing digital graphics, I don't have somebody else that could man the table, which is unfortunate. I know that there are a couple of people that are going to be taking tables that have other folks in their organization that can man the table while they are doing some of the other stuff. So we're going to do that. It's a fundraiser. We're trying to get sponsors. We're trying to get donations for door prizes and auction items and things like that. So if you've got anything, I'll put links down below. If you want to be a sponsor, levels start at $50 and go up to $1,000. Whatever you can do would be great. There's a link down below and you can do that. If you are a blind vendor, or as I like to call a blind boss, which I would love to really get that going. I don't know how I could do that and everything else that's going on. There's also a link down below. If you just want to buy tickets to support the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Vendors, or if you just want to support the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Merchants by attending the event or buying a ticket to attend the event, that doesn't mean you have to come. That link is below too. And any help that you can give for that would be awesome. And I would really appreciate it. Again, down below, all those links are there. And if you have any questions, again, please reach out to me. So I've been doing letters for folks to take to corporate sponsors, letters to take to local businesses to get a $25 gift card for an auction item or a gift basket of whatever the products are of a specific business or a door prize, whatever it might be. I've created those 2 letters, created some graphics, and done some blog posts for pablindmerchants.org. So you can check that out. Again, link will be down below in the description or show notes, depending on where you're consuming this episode. So I have that going on. There's also something called the Piano Bar. It is a combined fundraiser for the Pennsylvania Organization of Blind Parents and the Pennsylvania Organization of Parents with Blind Children. And that is happening April 12th, nfbofpa.org/piano bar if you would like to support that. But I've been creating graphics for that, for Facebook and Instagram and things to that effect. So that's more things that I've been doing. And then there are some other business things that are happening within the affiliate that have taken my time. I've spent over 3 hours on phone calls yesterday for the affiliate. So all of those add up. When I started calculating when I was in Baltimore, there are months that I know I put in 100 hours a month for NFB stuff. And in fact, while I was in Baltimore, we were told you got to count that too. We did 2 12-hour days and a 14-hour day. So there's a bunch of hours. There's 38 hours there alone for March. So March, I'll probably be over 100 hours with all the amount of things that I do. There's not a day that goes by that I don't do less than 2 or 3 hours worth of NFB work. And Jane and I were texting today, and she said, "What do you have on the tap today?" I said, "I don't have anything on tap today. I've got nothing scheduled." She said, "Let me do a press release for that." And I didn't have much on my schedule yesterday. I was on a podcast with my friend Max Ivy that once it comes out, I will share all the information. It was good to talk with him. But that was the only thing I had on tap yesterday on my schedule. And yet I still, like I said, probably put in, besides the 3 hours on the phone and the graphics work and cleaning up some of the wording for some of the letters that we're taking out to businesses and things like that. Yesterday was probably a 5 or 6 hour day. And that's not every day, fortunately, because I have other things. I have digital graphics things to do. I have this podcast to do. And this podcast is what has been suffering because of all the NFB stuff, because I just don't have time to do it. Now, I still have to edit episode 129 of White Canes Connect so I can get that out. On Sunday night or early Monday morning, I will do Federation Focus. Now, that's not a long thing. That's when there's not a lot of meetings going on and not a lot of fundraisers. I try to keep that around 15 minutes, little more, little less. The first one was a little bit longer because I was talking about what it was going to be. But in general, I'm looking to be somewhere around 15 minutes, give or take. So as I do all those things, and I've realized this, and I told Max before we started recording, if I could just do content, just produce content, whether it's this podcast, White Canes Connect, Federation Focus, or something else, that would be outstanding. I would love to do that. That is my goal in life, to do that and maybe make a living at doing that. right now, but maybe one day it will. And that's the goal. I was telling Jane today, I love to watch, when I eat lunch and drink my tea, I watch YouTube. And I watch it on our TV through Apple TV. And it doesn't have audio description. Most YouTube videos don't have audio description, but most YouTube videos are talking heads. There are a lot that, one of my favorite ones, French Vibes, there are some times I wonder what's going on because there are long stretches of them walking down by the sea or in their village above the Mediterranean Sea that I really don't know too much of what's going on. I know they're walking within the village, but I watched one today, and I don't remember what it was called, but it was a 60-year-old guy that did his first video. This was his first video. And he's talking about it, and he said, yeah, people probably aren't going to watch. And I'll put the link down below. I'll find it and I'll put the link down below. I had to stop the video and back it out and listen to VoiceOver read how many views it had. Now, could you take a guess at how many views this guy had for his first video? Now, if I hit 20 views, and I have on an occasion, I am tickled. This guy didn't have 20. He has 19,000 views. 19,000 views on his first video. I just want 20 in the first week or so. Just 20. And then I'll build from there. I couldn't believe it. And the video, I don't think he edited it. He coughs a couple of times. If I cough, I usually take that out. If I sneeze, I take that out. If I say, or I take that out. Now, I might not take that out if I can find it when I'm editing, because the uhs and ums get taken out with the click of a button. With the script, which is what I use to do the main editing of the podcast. I am an affiliate for that. There's a link down in the show notes / description. If you want to try it out, it is fantastic to use to edit audio and video. Fantastic. Give it a try. They do have a free trial to start. And if you do sign up and start using it and paying for it, I'll get a little money, which is great. And I appreciate that. But 19,000 views I think it was out 2 weeks. He put it out 2 weeks ago. 19,000. So it shows what the topic is really determines what kind of views you get. It proves it. I also checked stats today for Federation Focus. And I don't remember, I think it was the second episode, I looked at how many people stuck around to the end. And it was 61% stuck around to the very end of the video. That's a pretty good number. I don't know. I've never looked at my stats for that. I guess I'm a little afraid to. But if I could do content to make a living, I would be so excited and so happy. It's not going to happen with the blind stuff. It's going to happen with some sort of travel, some sort of move, some sort of something else. Blindness is a very low incidence disability, and therefore there's not a lot of blind folks to watch. And this podcast and YouTube channel specifically are folks who really aren't blind. I do have some blind folks that watch and listen, but they're interested to hear, what I've got to say. But it's primarily to show how a blind person can function and work within society, and how they can work a computer and use a mobile phone and do a specific job. And that is something that I think is important, because a lot of folks don't think blind people can do anything. And that's the stereotype I'm trying to move folks away from. Hey, that guy did that. Wow, that's pretty cool. That's what I'm trying to help get the word out on. Blind folks can do it. Listen, I can't do some sort of chemical engineering, but you know what? In our chapter, in the Keystone chapter, there is a girl that does that. My eyes glaze over when she starts talking about what she does. I don't know what that is. Again, I'm not one of the smarter ones. And when she talks about that, it reminded me of when Liz and I first bought salon supplies and interiors, and the reps from the different manufacturers are coming in, and they're talking about hair colors and perms and this and that and the other. And they're talking about the chemistry behind it. I'm like, oh my God, I thought I was done with chemistry back in 1982. It wasn't yesterday. So again, it depends on what you know, what you like, and what your talents are. And that's what I realized after I came back from Baltimore. I am never going to be as smart as those 20-year-olds who knew so much and had a great, I don't want to say a great plan, but just knew what to say and what to do. Do they know everything? Of course not. but they are at a much better place than I am. And you just have to focus on what you can do best. Because when you focus on what you do best, somebody else is going to do the other things. Those 20-year-olds that knew so much and could do so much and will one day be national leaders in the National Federation of the Blind, they're on their way. The other thing that I had, when I was talking to Liz when I was down there, before I met Frank and the other person who was older than me, I kind of questioned being there because of my age. How much longer could I possibly give the organization where, as I say to Jane and some of my friends on occasion, and Liz for that matter, cognitive decline is real and it will come. And maybe it's already started. And so how much great can I do between now and then? 5 years, 10 years? I don't think more than that. Maybe 15. I mean, I like doing it. And that's one thing. Again, I like producing content and I would be happy to do it for as long as I like doing it. And whether that's, like I said, 5 or 10 years, the Business Enterprise Program, which I talked about in the last episode, looks like they're going to have training up and running within a year. Now, I was speaking to the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Merchants president, Pam Baccaro, the other day, and she said their goal is to have it by the fall. She didn't seem to think it would be that soon, maybe by the beginning of 2026. That would be close to 6 years of no training. But once they get training opened, then that starts everybody able to get into the training program, which she said would last about 4 months up in Johnstown and maybe a little bit less. And I said when she did training, she started in January and it took her 9 months, I think she said, until she got her location. And I don't know if she opened within that year from this January start or if it was just after that. But 9 months until she knew where she was going to have a location. I don't remember what she said. So that's great. But another year out, in that time, I will turn 61. And if it takes another year, I will turn 62. That is not something I am interested in doing when I'm that age. Now, my dad would probably laugh at me because my dad didn't start in his own business until he was in his 50s. And it started when my uncle had died. And my uncle owned a small supermarket, not by today's standard. It was bigger than a grocery store. It wasn't a corner grocery, but it was a small supermarket, probably around 12,000 or 14,000 square feet, pretty much the size of a larger CVS or Walgreens today. Supermarkets on part are generally much bigger than that. Probably 40 to 50,000 square feet on the smaller side, and some Wegmans and other stores are up to maybe over 100,000 square feet. So when my uncle had died suddenly, he helped my aunt run them, and then my aunt said, "Hey, I don't want to do this. This isn't my thing. It was my uncle's thing." So my dad bought the store, or stores, I don't remember if it was one or two, from her, and that started him. That was in 1970. My dad was 52 years old. And he then worked until he was around 70. Let me do the math real fast. It was in the mid-80s that he sold, so just before he was 70. So his career of owning markets, and he kind of was like a flipper. And it wasn't a big thing. Like people buy and sell houses today. They buy them and they fix them up and then they sell them. That's what my dad did. He would buy a distressed chain store, whether it was Acme, A&P, and I don't think A&P is around anymore, or one of the other big chains that were in the inner city or suburbs. He would buy it. Sometimes it just took some paint on the wall and he'd open up and put some inventory in and open up. Other times it was more of a rebuild, but he would work it and build up the business and then sell it. So to think that I would start in a business enterprise program operation when I'm 61, 62 years old, unlike when you own your own business, you can't sell it. When you're done with it, you say, "Hey, I'm done with it. I'm going to give up this location." And then somebody else takes it over. So that you're not building any kind of equity there. You might make a great living while you're running it, but whether it's on the highway or in a postal facility like Kirk had that I worked for him for a little bit, where you have 30 to 50 machines and you have to fill them up once or twice, maybe 3 times a week, depending on the season and where they're located. And that is something that Liz and I think, could do. Now we could do it. But as we get older, we have more aches and pains and we have more difficulty. I mentioned with my hands, there are some days that I can't make a fist tight enough to hold my cane firmly, that I have to use what's called a pencil grip. So there is no way that day in and day out I would be able to do some sort of business like that. And I don't want to have employees. I knew that after salon supplies and interiors and we had some issues there, I don't want employees again. That is one thing. I will hire vendors to do work like I do with digital graphics design, but I don't want employees. I don't want that headache. I don't want to worry about all the different things that can go on with an employee. I just don't want it. And I know you're saying, well, it's hard to scale a business when you don't have employees. I get that. I'm not looking to scale a business. I'm looking to make a living. And I believe that I can make a living with something I do on my own or that Liz and I do. So we'll see what we end up with. I would like for her to not have to go to Walden every day. I think she would like to not have to go to Walden every day. She comes home exhausted. And the key with that from Walden is the medical insurance. That's where we get our medical insurance. I think we can replace the money, no problem from there. It's the medical insurance that would be very costly for us. So that's my goal. And I think that would be Liz's goal too, is to find something that can throw off a little money. And, maybe it's digital graphics if we push a little harder with it. Maybe it's something else. But that would be the business and not to worry about the business enterprise program. But we'll see. I mean, there's some other things that we're thinking about and maybe wanting to do. So that was what I learned in Baltimore. Coming back from Baltimore, it was an easy ride. Bing, bang, boom, I was home. I'm always amazed that I got on a train and within an hour, I was from Baltimore into Philadelphia. Now, I'll have to look into getting off at Wilmington because Wilmington is below where our house is. And it might be easier if I got off at Wilmington and then either Ubered from Wilmington to home or took a SEPTA train from Wilmington to home, depending on how the traffic goes and how easy it is to get from the Amtrak part of the Wilmington train station to the SEPTA part. I don't know if it's like in Philadelphia where you stay in the one building and you're there. So I'll have to look into that because that would shorten the trip even that much more because it takes me about a half an hour to get from my house to 30th Street Station. And if I could get to the Wilmington train station in 30 minutes or less, like a pizza from Domino's, it would be better for me to go there because it would be a shorter time on the train. I think it was around 40 or 45 minutes. And obviously, give me a few more minutes at home with Ziggy before I go. So that was my trip. And again, I was just thinking the whole time. And one of the things that we talked about in Baltimore that I read over and over on the train home. And again, when I say I read something, I listen on my phone to a document being read. I don't actually read it. I'm listening to the National Federation of the Blind Constitution and the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania Constitution. There are differences. And there are more things in the national constitution than in the Pennsylvania Constitution. So you have to know both because the Pennsylvania Constitution sets forth most things, but there are things that if it doesn't say it in the Pennsylvania Constitution, it says it in the NFB Constitution, and you have to abide by those. So there's been some things that we've had to to look into with that. So back and forth, I think I went through it 4 or 5 times. And one of the other board members had called me when I was on the train, and I started laughing when I answered the phone. And I said to her, I said, "How was the seminar?" I said, "Oh, it was great," and so forth and so on. And I said, "Guess what I'm doing right now?" And she said, "What?" I said, "I'm going back and forth reading the constitutions of both the state and the national." And she started laughing. And she said, "Well, what did you find? And here's what I've got," and blah, 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 blah. And we talked for a little bit. So it is something that you have to know. And again, I want to be a leader in the organization when between being down at National for the leadership seminar and what has been going on within the affiliate, National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania, also known as the affiliate when I say that, I never had the desire to be the president of the NFB of Pennsylvania. I never had the desire until some things started happening. And then I went to Baltimore, and it just reinforced it. Now, again, because of my age, I'm not going to be there long as the president. Again, it will depend as I get older how I feel and how my mental capacity is for everything. So I'm willing to do that. And again, as I told the president, I said, if you want to stay on for 7 months or 7 years, I will do whatever you want. And that is the key. I was talking to someone about something that this person was involved in, and the president was pushing something that I didn't necessarily think was the best idea as far as places to hold a certain thing. And she wanted to have it in one place, and I thought it would be better. The other organization that's doing it with us thought it would be better in a different place. And when I was talking to this person about it, he said, "Oh, you didn't want it to be in?" I said, "No, I thought it would be better where the other folks suggested because it's just easier to get to and so forth." And he said, "Well, why did you say that then?" I said, "Because what the president said is what the organization says. The president didn't say she wanted it in some crazy out of the way place. I just thought the other place would be better." And that's why when the president has something, it is them that determines when a meeting is called, where a particular event is held, and so forth, unless we're talking about chapters. If it's a statewide thing, the president determines. She might put it up to a vote to the board, but the president says, "Hey, we should have this here." So while we're talking about NFB stuff, let me tell you about White Canes Connect, episode 128, and I'll tell you a story about that episode. That was an episode we did with a guy named Gary Wunder, Wunder, not like Stevie Wonder. This is actually his name, Gary Wunder, and Chris Danielson. Both are from the communications team down at National. Gary was the long-term editor of the Braille Monitor, which is a magazine that comes out 11 times a year. There's a double episode in August, September, after the National Convention. Has stories about things that are going on within the NFB and things that some blind folks have done that are great, some other things that are going on. Just a great publication. You don't have to read every article in it. Chris Danielson is the new editor of the Braille Monitor, and Gary is going to be doing an oral history project of the National Federation of the Blind. And it gave me flashbacks because my friend Ken said to me on multiple occasions that I should sit down with my dad and record about his different stories of when he was in the Army Air Corps. He has so many great stories. He started out in aviation ordnance, and he got tired of doing that. He dropped out of school when he was in 8th grade, so he wasn't big into school, but yet he's teaching aviation ordnance. There's a picture of him, I hope we still have it, of him sitting on all these bombs. He also taught some other things. I don't remember what they are, but after a while, he got tired of teaching. And again, he doesn't mind teaching if it's on the job. He was great at teaching new employees in his businesses and things like that, but he wasn't a school guy. And so he said, "Look, I want to go into fight." And he did. He was a tail gunner, mostly in B-17s during World War II. And on his second to last mission, plane gets shot down. They try to stay on the plane until it gets to Switzerland. They don't make it, so they jump out. On the plane, they're all bailing out. Now, as a tail gunner, my dad was all the way in the back of the plane. And when the landing gear is up, he's stuck back there. So they had to put the landing gear down for him to get out from back there. And that's when they all got together to say, "Hey, we got to jump out of the plane." And they ended up coming down with their parachutes in Quedlinburg, Germany, where they were met by a bunch of townspeople that then had the Nazis come and collect them. And so my dad spent the next 13 months from Germany to Poland. And when his camp got liberated, and I don't remember if the camp was in Poland or Germany, he was able to get his, I don't know what you would call it, his document that had all his information on it. And upstairs in our living room, my mom had made a shadow box, which I know I've talked about before, which has all of his paperwork and has a list of the crew, has a picture of the crew, has a letter from the War Department saying that he was missing in action. This was before they knew he was a prisoner of war. So I didn't do that. Now, I can recite a lot of his more famous stories, like the run on the Ploieski oil fields that they had to, it was so far away that he was based in the UK. They had to fly from the UK, drop their bombs wherever the Ploieski oil fields are, and then continue east to Russia, refuel, and then fly back to the UK. Evidently, that was a big thing. Our former attorney loved his war stories and always asked when we had lunch with him or whatever, hey, tell me one of those stories. But I don't remember them all. And had I recorded those on video and or audio, it would have been great to have. They just would have been outstanding, and I didn't get them. So what Gary is doing now, talking to different folks, and it came on the heels of one of our Keystone Chapter founding members passing away in February. And we never got anything like that from her. The stories that she had, she was in the NFB long before the Keystone Chapter happened, but when Keystone Chapter was founded, she was one of them that helped found the chapter and then was the longtime treasurer of the chapter. And then I took over for treasurer from her. And she was very old school. Everything was done in Braille on paper, nothing on the computer, nothing. So all of her notes and any of that stuff, I really couldn't use any of it because I don't read Braille. And I think I could get caught up just as quickly as looking at some bank statements and things like that. So we talked about the Braille monitor. We talked about the oral history. We talked about the communications team and how they can help get the word out for different events within our chapters and the affiliate itself. And so it was a good episode. Now, I laughed, and the funny thing was we talked to them. Lisa and I sat down with them at the very end of January. I had just started to get this cold that I ended up making worse when I was at Washington Seminar in February. So that episode came out after one where I was really sounding terrible. And after another one where I was sounding a little not as bad as the worst, but not as good as this episode. So because of constraints and the Braille monitor and the communications guys not being timely, I kept pushing that off. We had one where we talked to Dylan Hitler-Gaudet about his testimony on Congress and how Elon Musk had called him something, and then all of the trolls started piling on with, this guy's blind. How could he keep track of who's buying what and doing what? That's laughable. He can't see a spreadsheet. How could he be doing this stuff? And again, there are ways, that's why this podcast exists, to tell you that a blind person can and does use spreadsheets every day. So because of the timing, we wanted to get that out. And there was another one we wanted to get out that had to do with some fundraising things. So we shuffled them around. Just because we recorded it in January, we don't say, well, it's recorded in January, that's the next one to go out. We held it and did the other couple and then put that out. So that's what's out now. Episode 128, White Canes Connect. You can watch it on YouTube at PA Blind Podcast, as I mentioned. And when I say watch it, it's a static image and audio. You can listen on Apple and Spotify and most podcast directories. You can find it. White Canes Connect. And I appreciate you listening to that. If you have any kind of interest in learning about some blind publications and things like that from folks down at National. Both guys have been in the National Federation of the Blind for decades. So they have a lot of knowledge, and it was great to speak to them. The episode has done pretty well so far. So that's the latest episode out. Again, we have an episode about a local garden in Philadelphia that I'll have out sometime on Monday before Federation Focus. Please check out Federation Focus too. Again, I'll put a link down below in the show notes or the description. Check that out too. But for now, that's all I've got. And I could tell you a lot of stories about Ziggy, but I'll shoot some video next time so you can actually watch and listen. That's all I have. It's episode 283. So look for the show notes, iCantCU.com/283. That's iCantCU.com/283, numerically speaking. And remember, I Can't See You sounds like a whole sentence, but it's only 7 characters long. iCantCU.com/283. Please reach out on the socials at David Benj on most of them. Facebook, LinkedIn, Threads, Instagram, where else? Twitter, X. There's a few others that I'm forgetting. If I didn't mention LinkedIn, I'm there. Again, at David Benj. Reach out to me directly via email, iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com, iCantCUpodcast@gmail.com, or better yet, give me a buzz, 646-926-6350. You've got up to 3 minutes. Leave your name and town. If you do leave a voicemail, questions, comments, show ideas. Tell me something about fantasy baseball because I'm in and my team is called the Gas House Gorillas. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of I Can't See You. Be well, stay safe, and I'll talk to you in the next episode.
Thank you for listening to the I Can't See You podcast with David. Please rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. And don't forget to share the podcast with your friends.